The global carbon budget tells us how much greenhouse gas emissions we can still afford to emit to have a reasonable chance of staying below the 1.5 degrees Celsius global warming temperature. There are two approaches to staying within the global carbon budget limit and managing our carbon emission levels. We can share resources, and we can share effort. A resource-sharing approach asks the question, how much of the remaining emissions should each country be allowed to emit? Each country gets its own carbon budget, which it must not exceed. An effort-sharing approach asks the question, by how much should each country reduce its emissions? With the expectation that different countries or sectors need to make different efforts to bring emissions down. To stay within the global budget, the science tells us we have to reduce emissions so that globally they peak by 2025, come down by 43% by 2030 and end at net zero around 2050. Whether using the resource sharing or effort sharing approaches, the allocation method should ensure fair shares between countries. But how should we divide up the emissions resource or reduction effort required between countries? This is a question of global climate justice. In 1992, the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change adopted a principle of common but differentiated responsibilities and respective capabilities. Climate change is a common problem all countries share responsibility for addressing. At the same time, different countries can be expected to do more or less than others. So-called developed countries have already emitted a great deal for a long time, contributing to warming that is happening already, and so bear more responsibility. Developing countries say that they should still be allowed to emit to continue their economic development, at least up to a certain threshold. Countries' different national circumstances and capabilities also have to be considered. Some countries have much higher capacity to act than others, due to their higher income and wealth, level of development and access to technologies. But there are no agreed upon methods to quantify a country's responsibility and capability, or to allocate the global carbon budget or the effort required between countries. Issues that come into the debate about how to do this include responsibility for historical emissions, the state of economic development and the right to be able to develop to a certain level, the size of the population and per capita emissions, and financial, technological and other capacity to reduce emissions. Despite the debate, it is clear that we all need to take up our responsibility to reduce our contribution to global greenhouse gas emissions, and do our part to keep the global temperature below 1.5 degrees Celsius.